news and an independent news press is very important. I mean, our democracy depends on it. I mean, that sounds very lofty, but it's true.
On the 32nd episode of Passion in Progress, Chris Stein. Among a very experienced past in television and news broadcasting, Chris has been at CBS News for 17 years as a writer, editor, and producer. Before we get to the particulars, I just want to thank everybody who has been listening to the podcast so far. And if you do want to support the podcast, I'm on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Javier Mercedes. You can also share out the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, any of those social media things. If you tag me in a post on Instagram, I'm at Javier Mercedes X. With all that out of the way, let's get to the 32nd episode of Passion in Progress with Javier Mercedes and Chris Stein. What is up, Merc Nation? Javier Mercedes here for yet again another Passion in Progress show, where we interview inspiring individuals, and hopefully through hearing their stories, you too are motivated to pursue your passions as well. Today on the show, we have writer, editor, producer of CBS News out of New York, but we're recording here in Austin, Chris Stein. How's it going?
That was a lot of energy. I'm a little psyched. I don't usually show, so this is as psyched as I get. But
you do producing and everything like that on the back end of news, so your face is in front of the camera, but I feel like you're just like the mastermind behind all of the news things that like come and go throughout CBS. Can you give an overview of the infrastructure, or I guess like what exactly your position is at CBS?
So I work at the worldwide global headquarters for CBS News in New York City, New York. We have bureaus and offices around the world. DC, obviously, we have a very big infrastructure there. We also have bureaus in Italy and Beijing and London and LA and San Francisco and Dallas and Miami. And I think that's all of them. So there are different divisions of CBS News. There's the shows. There's CBS This Morning. There's the CBS Evening News. There's the overnight program, the early morning show, CBS Morning News. We also have CBSN, our 24/7 streaming channel that we just came around a few years ago. And then I work for an entity called CBS NewsPath. And what we do is we provide content and stories to all the affiliates around the nation and our global partners around the world. So basically my stories, for the most part, are distributed to all the affiliates, your local affiliate here in Austin, your local affiliate here in, or my local affiliate in New York City, Denver, Colorado, all of them. Every single city that has a CBS affiliate, we distribute those through a server system. And then it's up to them whether or not they want to run these stories. And then usually mine are used by anywhere from 138 to 160 affiliates around the country. I think like 5 million to 7 million eyeballs see every story.
And you were telling me you come up with a story a day.
I come up with a story a day. It's a lot of collaborating. A lot of them are my ideas. A lot of them are news that's happening. I basically work at what we call the consumer franchise. And that's really, it's a pretty wide berth. It could be scams. It could be new tech. It could be autonomous cars. It could be... I just did one recently about how you need to lock down your dressers and tables and all these things so that your kids don't pull them over and hurt themselves. It's just a lot of everything. During the fireworks, 4th of July, how not to blow off your hand with a firework. During Thanksgiving, how not to deep fry a turkey and burn your house down, because that's happened. And a lot of these stories involve like cautionary tales with real people. I interviewed a father just a month ago who lost his daughter when she climbed up on her dresser and pulled it over on top of herself. And he became very active. There's a community of people this has happened to, and they've pushed for awareness. They've pushed for new regulations so that other parents don't have to go through this. Go through that, I should say. And so it's just a lot of different kinds of stories, and I come up with ideas, but also reporters will pitch me ideas, other producers, and we'll just collaborate to get everything done. And much like yourself, who has to create these videos on a regular basis, or other creators out there who do the same, you have an idea and then you have to execute it. And where yours are mostly a lot of the YouTube creators are first person. This is what I'm doing. I'm telling my story through my perspective. We tell our stories usually through someone else's perspective. So like the father who lost his child. Here's what happened to him. This government organization says it happens to this many people every year. Here's how you can stop it from happening to you. That's basically how a lot of these stories go down. Reporting what's happened to others. We're not doing like I'm me and this is my life, and how you could be like me.
The tale of most YouTubers.
Right. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Behind the scenes. Can you give an example from top to bottom how that looks for a specific story from your perspective, as opposed to somebody in a local market? You have the availability to all of these other people and a whole vast amount of like infrastructure that's there in New York or wherever you need to travel and get the contacts to reach the person to do the thing. Case in point is you're calling upon people like Gary Vee, Casey Neistat, or Jack Conte, like the actual authorities in the space. What I find funny is they're only in there for like a blip, but I'm sure that's what has to happen for TV. Right. Can you give a specific example from top to bottom, like from concept to execution, how that looks?
A lot of the news we do is for millennials and other younger generations, it might be like, oh yeah, I already know about this. But a lot of our audience might not know about it. And we had a juice company in New York City. They make the juices either bottled or fresh that you want, and smoothies, etc. And what they were doing is they had a selfie wall. And I think you got a discount if you took a selfie with your drink. And it's just their way of promoting their product through Instagram, Facebook, etc. And this was a few years ago before it became like an explosion of Instagram promotion all over the place. It wasn't just them. We did it with a place that does nails for women, I guess, and for men too, if you want them done, where you could take a picture of your nails and then immediately post them. We talked to Gary Vee basically about this is how advertising has changed. Instead of like just buying a spot on TV or the radio or even a Facebook ad or whatever, let's do it through the people. And now other people are endorsing your product. We've seen an explosion of that.
Yeah, obviously.
Especially in your community.
Yeah, everybody knows what that is, but back then.
But back then it was like kind of a newer thing. And so that's what I try to do. I try to kind of hit these trends before they happen.
Can you get into how you view your type of media versus like what's happening now with like YouTube, with things like Reddit and all that other stuff? It's like how you go about stories is explaining it to a different type of generation as opposed to people that know how to seek that out on the internet or use Google, I guess.
Traditional news does have an older audience. I mean, there's no getting around that. But these stories travel for everybody. And we now have digital components that a lot of younger people are starting to watch CBSN, our streaming channel, because they don't have TV. So they start watching that. I'll just meet people myself and they'll be like, oh yeah, I watch CBSN, especially in the morning. Like when I'm getting ready, I put it on to see what's going on around the world. And so I think we're kind of seeing a circle where people got away from that. They cut the cord. They weren't, and for that reason, they weren't watching news. I think people are, especially when they start hitting their later 20s or 30s, they want to be informed, especially when they have children. They start caring about the news a lot more and the world and what's going on around it. When they start their 401ks start kicking in, there's things they start worrying about things and thinking more deeply about things. So that's where the news comes in. And news and an independent news press is very important. I mean, our democracy depends on it. I mean, that sounds very lofty, but it's true.
Yeah. When you air something, how much time do you have to tell a story?
90 seconds to 2 minutes.
This is some heavy hitting stuff, like just what you were talking about with like dressers falling on kids. Like, how did you get to this point of being able to efficiently tell a story? Not only that, but at quantity, doing it day to day to day to day. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's definitely hard, but there's a lot of jobs that are hard, and you get, it's just not like anything. It's like, you do it long enough, you get faster and faster at it. The process is, well, I'll go back. You asked me about my career, so I'll go through that. Went to college in Denver, Colorado, and I knew I probably wanted to do something in the media. I wasn't really sure what, when I was a kid in high school. I had an English class where they wanted me to do a biography on somebody. So I went through the library, I started looking at biographies, and I picked out this Edward R. Murrow book. He was a very famous anchor, journalist, reporter for CBS News during World War II and beyond. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, news sounds pretty cool. So that kind of sparked my mind in high school. I went to college and I went for a broadcasting and journalism degree in college. And being able to go to school in Denver was unique because you could do internships. And so I interned first in radio, and I did a lot of radio. And then I did I helped guys do spots for ads, which was funny because we had, I don't even know if people are going to know what this means, but we had a 4-track.
Can you give the context of what years you're talking about?
So yeah, this is like 92, probably 93, which was the last century for those. So 92, 93, we had no digital editing systems at all. And we had I think it was either an 8 or a 16 track. And basically what that means is that you could lay down 8 layers of audio. And so there would be like a music bed, and then your voice, and then if you want to add another voice, and then some more music. So you had some options to do all kinds of things. And those ads back then were like, this Friday night at your local bar. Your local bar. It's ladies' night. Ladies' night.
Did you have somebody else on another like microphone repeating?
No, you would just layer them.
Yeah,
you would layer yourself, and then you would like make your voice sound weird so that it was like this like background, But it was like a very a lot of people did those back then, if you can remember those. So that was interesting. I also did promotions. People who had advertised with the radio station, when they bought ads, they also got a promotion, which means the radio DJ would come to their establishment, whether it was a car dealership, a bar, or whatever, and be like, hey, we're here at this car dealership today. Come on down. We'll give you a T-shirt and hot dogs and, whatever.
You were at the Broncos too, weren't you?
Yeah. And then I did some TV internships, and I was a sports internship at 2 stations in Denver. And that was great because the reporters, or the anchors, I should say, the sports anchors would be like, all right, we need you to go to the ball game, and you sit in the press box and you watch the game. And then afterwards you go to the locker room and you interview the players about the game.
I love this behind the scenes.
And I was
so
like,
cool.
I was like, again, you're like 21, 22. You're like, I don't think life gets any better. Because the teams I was covering were the teams that I had grown up with. So imagine whatever city you're from and you're a diehard fan, and then all of a sudden you're interviewing the Colorado Rockies and the Denver Nuggets and the Denver Broncos. It was really great. And then there was a really hard internship to get at the Denver Broncos. It was a public relations internship, and I was able to get it, and that was great because you got to travel with the team. And my job during the week was public relations. So whatever the head of the public relations wanted, whether it was moving material here and there. It was also like when the players had lunch, a lot of times they did like radio interviews over the phone and things like that. And it was basically go get them, bring them to the microphone, those kind of things.
That's interesting.
It was kind of be the go-between.
Yeah, so you started out as being one of the interviewers to like, hey, let me like hold their hand and make sure they're in the right place.
Right. And that gave me an interesting perspective to see how both sides of it. I'm hanging out with John Elway and Steve Atwater, and this is like right before they started winning Super Bowls. It was right before that. Unfortunately, I wish I was born a couple of years later because I could have gone to the Super Bowl with the team. But and like I said, I travel with the team, and when we were on the road, this is just like right at the beginning of digital cameras. So what they used to do is our camera crews used to be at the top of the stadium, and they shoot. If you've ever watched a football game and guys are looking at their tablets, what they're looking at is they're looking at the overhead shots showing them the alignment of the players. So they can see what the defenses are doing. Because they always like cut to the quarterback during the game and he's on the sideline and he's looking at these. Before the tablets, they had pictures. But they were still taking pictures from the top of the stadium. But they couldn't electronically get them down because a lot of the stadiums weren't wired.
That's crazy.
So you would physically stand next to a printer up on the top of the stadium, grab the thing off the printer, and run as fast as you could down, depending on the stadium. Sometimes there was partial elevator, and then the rest was like through the crowd. And then depending on which sidelines you were, you might have to go all the way around. And so that was pretty cool because you're like part of the team. You're helping. You're actually contributing to the team in a way. A very small way, but you're helping. And there was different. I remember we went to Buffalo, where the fans are like, they're just like diehard, and they're smart too. They understand the game, and they knew what we were doing. They knew that I was doing what I was doing, and so I would run down the stairs, and people would like get up and kind of stretch out in the middle of the stairs to block me, to try to delay my progress to the side.
That's crazy. Came for news, got like behind the scenes NFL stories. This is awesome.
So that was pretty cool. That was a really cool experience. And I really thought I wanted to be a sports anchor. So I was in my senior year at that time, and I was in a broadcasting class, and I'm sitting there talking to a bunch of guys. And they're all guys that look like me, were my same age. And I said, what do you want to do? I want to be a sports anchor. What do you want to do? I want to be a sports anchor. What do you want to do? I want to be a sports anchor. I was like, a lot of people want to be sports anchors. This might be really hard.
Yeah.
And so when I looked around the nation, which back in the day I couldn't even like go on the internet and look for job interviews, I actually went to the library to look up all the TV markets in the country.
How did you get the actual addresses to send your tapes to?
Phone books.
Phone books?
Yeah, at the library.
Oh my gosh.
At the library, you would grab a phone book from Oregon. So I'd find all these markets and be like, all right, here's the smallest markets, like Butte, Montana, Idaho Falls, Idaho.
And the library has that.
And then the library had like phone books from Idaho Falls, and you'd be like, and you'd look up phone numbers, addresses, and I'd call. I'd say, who do I send a resume to? Who do I send a tape to? And they'd be like, this is the person you send it to. Somebody gave me a call from Twin Falls, Idaho. And they said, hey, we're interested. We like your resume. Would you want to come work here? And I said, sure, like as a sports anchor? And they're like, no, actually what we're looking for is a director.
Jeez.
And I said, okay. And they're like, do you have directing experience? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure I do. And I mean, I had done a little bit, but not a lot. So I went out there for an interview. And they put me up in a hotel, and they fed me and showed me around and all that. And they're like, would you want to come work here? And they told me how much it was. And I think it was maybe $19,000 a year or something like that.
What around what time?
1995-ish.
Okay.
So
yeah, but this is Idaho, so I'm assuming
that went
cost
a long
of
way.
living.
Yeah, for me, that was
living.
like a lot of money because I never had any money. Yeah. So that for me was a lot of money. So I moved to Idaho, man. I just packed my bags and got a U-Haul and took what I could and drove it up to Idaho. That was great. You know, so I directed, and I also did master control, which was like the place where you actually put out the content. So you record the shows from the networks at the affiliates. Like I was actually at a CBS affiliate, so it was like Walker, Texas Ranger, and Jeopardy, and Home Improvement, and Wheel of Fortune, and all those kind of things. And they were sending them via satellite. We record them there, and then we play them back out of whatever time period.
That's what I was going to ask. So, like, when in a program schedule, just any kind, when you go to commercial, is somebody like inserting the commercials, or like
physically inserting?
How would that look? Because you have the national commercials, and then you have the local. How would you incorporate all of that?
Oh, sure. So
for a station
back then. I mean, everything's digitally now, so the
but I'm so
just
curious
do it themselves. But back then, you know, you had in master control, you had a series of machines, tape machines. I was in Idaho, which was 2 hours behind East Coast. Mm-hmm. So East Coast would feed it out, I believe, at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 o'clock our time, and then we ran it, I think, at 7 o'clock our time. So everything was taped and then played an hour later. So, like you said, the network had their ads on, and then there would be some kind of cue. It might be a promo for one of their shows. Mm-hmm. It was something that you knew was coming, and you had like a list. So it was like, when promo for this show pops up, then you have a black hole for your ads. Mm-hmm. And as the master control operator, you waited for the end. You had like a 2-second roll, I think, or 3 seconds. So you knew you were watching a clock. So I think it was like a 15-second promo. So let's say it was a 15, like, coming up Sunday, these two teams are going to play football against each other, and you're timing that ad promo at 15 seconds, and when it hits 12, you roll your commercial because it has a 3-second delay, and then you switch it after they fade, and hopefully you have like a millisecond of black, and then yours fades up, and then you roll right in the break. That's why when you're watching TV, sometimes even cable, mm-hmm. you'll see an ad, and then all of a sudden you'll see like the back end of another ad. Yep. It's because either digitally or humanly someone didn't get the timing right. Yeah. And it didn't work out right.
Especially when it happens during the Super Bowl, then somebody's getting fired.
Yeah, that's not good.
To dive into that, even in like the late night broadcasting, say it's like, I don't know, 3 a.m. in the morning and there's infomercials. Is there still somebody behind a switching board, like making sure that the feed is the feed?
Yeah. I mean, even in the digital age, you still have physical humans in these places running those boards.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, but it's funny because when the first station I was at 3 a.m., we went off the air.
Oh, so
yeah, I think at like 2 a.m. we would play the national anthem, and then you would go off the air.
So if you were to turn your TV to that channel, what would appear?
It was just like a slate with the.
They were just like, we're not working right now.
Yeah, no, and that was common. That was like very common.
Man,
I think there's actually, if you ever see the movie Poltergeist, there's a scene where the dad like falls asleep, I think, in the living room, and the national anthem goes, and it just goes to whatever it was, I think Fuzz or something.
Man, if I was somebody back in the day and I wanted to advertise my product, I would have been like, hey, I'll pay you $100 and I'll just come sit and I'll work it, and then just roll my ads the whole like intermittent time when people aren't broadcasting.
I never thought of it.
Going on from there, is there anything in between there that you want to talk about into where you're at right now? Or
yeah, just real quick. So I guess the key is I met somebody there. I made friends with a woman there, a girl at the time, and just platonically friends. We became friends, and she was a anchor reporter there, and she went on to a larger market in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and I had done about 6 months of directing and master control, and I knew I wanted to either get into reporting or producing, and so I went to the station. I said, I really enjoy my time here, but this isn't really what I want to do. I want to be a reporter and a producer, and I'm hoping that like my work ethic, this is what I can do. And they said, look, we really just need you to keep doing what you're doing. And maybe down the road. And, I'm young. I'm like, I'm just going to go. I wasn't under a contract. Yeah. So I told them, if you don't give me what I want, I'm probably going to leave. And they're
laying the hammer.
Yeah. So I don't think they thought I was going to leave as fast as I could, as fast as I did. My now friend had moved on to Idaho Falls, where she was a reporter, and she said, do they have a producer opening here? And they said, yeah, come on over, do an interview. So I drove over, did an interview, and a couple weeks later, I was living in Idaho Falls, and I had signed a 2-year deal there. So I was there for a couple of years, and then I got a job in Seattle, which at that time was a really big jump. Mm-hmm. I went up there for an interview, and my lease was up on my apartment. And I told the guy, I said, listen, I'm going to come up there, and I'm hoping you can hire me because my lease is up, and I'm just going to pack up my stuff and go. I literally packed everything I owned in my car, threw out what I couldn't fit or gave away, drove to Seattle and did an interview. And he's like, well, I'll let you know. And I'm like, let me know fast because I don't have a job and everything's in my car. I'm staying at my best friend's house. So like a week later, he called and he said, yeah, we want you to come work here. And who I was working for was there was this movement towards regional cable stations. So you had the big cable news channels like MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and this was regional news. It was Northwest Cable News. And what they did is they were owned by the same company that owned the NBC affiliate in Seattle, the NBC affiliate in Portland, and a few other affiliates around that region, Boise, other markets in Washington and Oregon, and it's Oregon, not Oregon. So I was using other stations' material, and we were putting newscasts together on a regional basis. And so I was producing first the weekend overnight show, then the weekend primetime show, then the morning overnight show, and then the evening primetime show was kind of our flagship show. Mm-hmm. And I did that for probably 2 years.
Is that how the hierarchy normally works? Is like you start with least viewed thing probably, and then you work your way up?
Right.
Okay.
The friend of mine who had been working in Idaho Falls had gone to a regional cable station in New York while I was at the regional cable station in Seattle. And she called and I said, I'm here, but I'm kind of stuck. I'm like gone as far as I can. So now I either have to go to a higher market and try to be a producer, or maybe thinking about going senior producing, getting into management. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And she said, well, wait, the executive producer job at the regional place I'm at is open if you're interested.
Of course it is.
So I called them and I said, I'm interested. And they're like, great. Yeah. And I did the interview and, they said, we'll get back to you. And I went to Seattle and they said, yeah, we like you. Come on up to New York. This was called RNN TV. And it was a family owned operation. And I was the executive producer there. And we did a series of newscasts throughout the day, but they also heavily ran infomercials. And there was a young lady there who was the saleswoman of all the infomercials, and who later became my girlfriend and then became my wife.
End of story.
Yeah.
Thanks for the podcast.
You're welcome.
When you went from Seattle to New York, the pace at which you were doing news, did it go exponentially faster and how you had to do
The
things?
thing that was most interesting was the stories. So in Seattle, a lot of the stories were the way salmon were running through streams, and, you know, and
it's probably
and
a
there's
very
lot of
legit thing, though.
No, but it was a lot of environmental stories. There wasn't a lot of crime. There was politics, but not like, you know, what you're used to seeing. It was news, but there wasn't a lot of big news. And then I came to New York, and it was all big, huge news. It was protests and violence and disasters, and, you know, it was just like a lot trials, and it was really in depth, and the politics part too was really interesting as well. So yeah, the news cycle was completely different. So it kind of, I had to also get like smart really fast about the history of what had been going on in New York, not only over time, but just the past few years. So that all these reference points for the current stories I was working on, whether it be politics or, you know, like I said, protests because of a racial situation or something like that. So yeah, you have to get smart really fast.
Can you remember a situation where you were like interviewing somebody and they're like, yeah, you remember back in blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, nah, I don't, nope, let me Google that really quick.
Well, there wasn't Google.
Yeah.
So we couldn't do that. But I did start, you know, I remember interviewing like Elliot Spitzer. He was the Attorney General of New York. And I had done some research on him, and then he later became governor, and then he later was no longer the governor because he was caught with a prostitute. So those are the kind of situations I met at RNN. I met Hillary Clinton when she was running for New York Senate. She obviously had already been the first lady. So I got to pre-interview her, and before
awesome.
She interviewed on our station with the actual anchor. And then there was like a lot of Congress guys and, you know, a few sports people that you got to meet, you know, while I was there. But there was no like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. I tried to stay pretty, you know what I'm getting into before I interview somebody. So
yeah. Now where you're at in New York, doing the writing, and you can definitely tell all the different scopes of producing, writing, editing, like it's all there. And I feel like when you probably applied for the job that you're at right now, they're like, oh yeah, was it the same person that helped you get the job?
It was.
There you
go. There had been, I should say, so this friend of mine in Idaho Falls, Idaho, who had come to New York, she had actually followed another person who went from Idaho Falls to New York to RNN TV. So he went there first. She followed him. Then she called me. I followed her. And then another friend of ours at RNN TV got a job at CBS News. And they said, we're looking for producers who can do writing and editing and producing, which at the time was kind of a rare, people just didn't know how to do that. Yeah. Especially in New York, because there's a lot of unions in New York. So you can't just jump on a machine and start editing unless you're with the union. So there's some restrictions on what, and the Writers Guild. There's also a writing union as well.
So where do you fall now?
So now I'm in the Writers Guild and I'm in the IBEW.
You're in both?
I'm in both.
Does that ever compete with each other?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No. Yeah, we're in both. So yeah, it's an interesting way to be. But anyway, so the gentleman from Idaho Falls went to New York. Then my friend who from Idaho Falls followed him. And then someone else at RNN TV got a job at CBS News. They said, we're looking for producers. So she called my friend from Idaho Falls, and she said she's coming down. And then she called me, and she said, hey, they're looking for more producers. And it was mostly because 9/11 had just happened. And they were just amping up everything and just needed more people. So gave me a buzz, and I came down for an interview, and, you know, the rest is history.
So you got in right at 9/11.
I got there 9/11 December of 2001. Yeah.
Being at a news station, how was it in New York at that time?
Yeah, it was tough because, I mean, I was still in New York. I was a little outside of New York. Our base at RNN TV was about an hour outside of New York. But, I mean, obviously all we were covering was 9/11. And interesting side story. So I'm the executive producer of RNN TV. I was ready for some vacation. So early September, I called my friend in Seattle and I said, I'm going to come back out. We're going to hang out because I need a vacation. He says, yeah, sure. Come on out. So I get on a plane on September 10th.
Oh, geez.
Out of Albany, New York, connecting in Atlanta and then going to Seattle. And the plane was delayed. So by the time I got to Atlanta, my connection was gone. So like, all right, Delta said, we'll put you up for the night and then you can leave first thing in the morning of 9/11. So I left first thing in the morning of 9/11 on a plane, and I was on my way to Seattle. And the pilot, I was sleeping, and it was like a half-empty plane. I was like laid out over 3 seats. I'm like, this is the best flight I've ever been on in my life. I'm sleeping, and the pilot came over and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, there has been a attack on the Pentagon, so we have to land. The FAA has said all planes must land out of the sky right now."
Jesus.
So we landed in St. Louis, Missouri, which was the closest airport we could get to. And I immediately grabbed they had phones. And if you remember, they had phones in the seat, and you swipe your credit card. And I called the station. I'm like, "What's going on?" They're like, "Oh, I can't talk right now." And I'm like, "Talk, what's going on?" They're like, "The Twin Towers have been attacked. The Pentagon's been attacked." They're telling me, and there was all this like other information that they thought was happening that wasn't really happening. And I'm like, "What?" And you're like, hard to believe. Then we land. Now we're on the tarmac for like hours because, planes just came out of the sky all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So we're on the tarmac for hours waiting for a gate. And luckily, I only had carry-on because by the time we got off, I went down a baggage claim, and it was just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and bags everywhere and things. And people are coming around, airport workers going, "If you need a hotel, there's still some space downtown," and this kind of... And so I spent like 4 days in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. At the time, RNN was associated with ABC News. So I went to the local ABC affiliate to do what I could to help my station and also help them. And I kept thinking it was a weird situation because we didn't know when the airports were going to open back up again. We're like, "Oh, it'll be tomorrow." And they're like, "No, it'll be tomorrow." And they'll be like, "No, it'll be tomorrow." And then so it took so I didn't like rent a car and just leave. If I would have known the first day, I would have just rented a car and like took off. But so I spent 4 days, and then I went back to New York eventually, and I missed pretty much the biggest news story ever, which was hard.
But you were there interviewing and doing all this stuff for all the aftermath, I'm assuming.
For months, it was just all 9/11 related coverage. And then when I went to the CBS, it was pretty much the same thing. And then it was the build up to the war. Then it was the war. It was just like nonstop, gigantic news all the time. Mm-hmm. So it was really like jumping in the deep end,
That's for sure.
Really
like
what it was, yeah.
You were to ask anybody, at least from like my generation, like because I feel like for other generations, there's probably other big things that have happened where they knew exactly where they were. Like for me, I remember our principal went around to every single room individually, talked to the teachers, and then they brought in a TV and they turned it on, and it was like they're on fire, but we didn't know that a plane had hit it. It was just like, "Oh, there's a fire on the Twin Towers," and then the second one hit, and it was like, "Oh," and everybody went home early and everything like that. Is there any kind of stories and everything that you want to talk about that's interesting that you wouldn't have even thought about either in the tech space or anything like that?
Well, there was a 9/11 related story. So on 9/11. 2011 was the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And at that time, I was doing medical stories. I was the medical producer at CBS News Path. And that was interesting because I'm learning like all this medical stuff. And I wasn't the greatest student of all time. Mm-hmm. So then to be like being able to converse with MDs and scientists and actually know what they're talking about and understanding their language, it took a lot. I'm interested in just about everything. So I'm a pretty quick study on many things. But I did this really interesting story on how they were still trying to identify remains from 9/11. People just hadn't shown up. So they realized they're gone. Yeah. But they were never able to officially give the family, "Here are the remains." And when they mean the remains, I'm talking about a little tiny, tiny piece of bone. Something that had blown up in the sky so there was some construction workers on a building not far from the World Trade Center, and they had been doing some work, and they noticed like just these little tiny particles, and they knew enough that this might be something. So they called the coroner, and the coroner came over and collected them. Well, they couldn't get, now this is right after 9/11 that they found this. They couldn't get any DNA information out of there, but there was this mandate that all the remains would be identified. So they had a group of scientists that were working together to figure out how can we get DNA out of the smallest, tiniest sample of tissue, bone, whatever it was. And so they figured out a way. They had to develop new technology to do this. And because of that, now remains from crime scenes, other tragedies all over the world can now be identified. So I was able to interview a woman who had lost her fiance on 9/11, but never had that confirmation that he was gone. And a month before 9/11, 2011, the coroner called and said, we've confirmed that your fiance is gone, and we have his remains if you'd like to bury them. And that's exactly what happened. And it was just a sense of closure for this person who had always, wondered what if, and he was a worker at the World Trade Center, I believe. And yeah, it was an incredible story of sorrow, the worst attack in America, modern technology, just all these things. And it was really a great story. I just remember that. That was great.
Yeah, in my mind, when I saw the clip of what you were talking about, what I was fascinated with is that it was these scientists like not sole purpose, but like their job when they would go to work was be like, I'm going to come up with some sort of thing to give closure to these families. And they were like, and you were saying it was like the 10-year anniversary. Like I can't imagine how long it took them to do that. And plus
10 years.
Yeah, well, yes, that, but hopefully with that technology comes other, I don't know, breakthroughs in science.
Yeah, totally. It has.
Yeah.
It really has. It's helped. I remember there was a case out of Germany where they couldn't identify some remains for 5 years. And because of that, that family was able to get closure. So it's led to all kinds of like crime scenes. They were able to extract DNA from things that they weren't able to before, which has helped with rape cases and murders and all kinds of things. So yeah, it's interesting how like a terrible, terrible, horrible tragedy can lead to something that actually comes out very good. So
tangent from the like really serious stuff. Can you talk about the shopping mall thing that you were telling me about?
Yeah, the shopping mall story was that was another interesting 360 of what's been going on in the retail market. So all these traditional brick and mortar retailers have been having all kinds of problems because people are shopping online more and more and more, and they're going to the store less and less and less. And because of that, there are underperforming stores a lot of times in malls, and they've been forced to shut down.
I think in one of your clips, it said that 1 in 4 malls were shutting down. Which was
that was the mall story. Yeah,
yeah, it was like, I don't know if it was related to the one that you're talking about, but it's crazy to me that's like, I don't know what year that was released, but that was
I think it was last year, right around this time, maybe 9-10 months ago, I believe.
Mm-hmm. But it kind of makes sense with how like Amazon and there's just like you can buy your things online. Yeah. But continue.
Yeah, well, just one thing on that is that the malls are shutting down, but people are trying to reinvent those spaces. Mm-hmm. So they're still shopping, but they also build an apartment building so that they have a built-in, not audience, they have a built-in group of people who can shop in those spaces. Mm-hmm. So
I think it was like health centers.
Yeah,
they were converting these malls into. There was already the real estate there, and they're like, well, it's already a great piece of land. Let's utilize it for something else.
So instead of like, some are getting knocked down, but others, like you said, are being turned into medical centers because medical is really big right now with all the baby boomers getting older and older and older.
Mm-hmm. With the other clips that you showed me, there was a lot of, I want to say driving and just like, if it wasn't self-driving cars, it was like hydrogen cars and like all that. I feel like that's a huge thing in the tech space right now. Do you find that you're doing a lot of those types of stories? And with the future of cars and everything like that, do you find that like the self-driving cars are going to be like here faster than what people think?
A few years ago, they were saying, a lot of people were saying 2020. Mm-hmm. Now that's 1 year away. So, I mean, right now there are self-driving cars on the one clip that I didn't show you was a Cadillac Super Cruise. And a Cadillac Super Cruise right now, you could buy one. And Tesla Autopilot is pretty much the same thing. You get on the highway, and they've digitally mapped certain highways so precisely that if you get into this car and you tell it, I don't want to drive the car, I want you to drive it, and it steers and it has sensors on the front so that if you come upon traffic, it slows down for you, then it speeds up if traffic goes away. And a lot of cars have that technology, but the steering is really precise, and you don't have to use your hands. You don't have to use the pedals. You don't have to do anything. The one thing it does have is a camera, so that if you start going like this, it beeps to let you know you need to look at the road. So you can see exactly where the technology's headed. I think that we're right on the cusp of a pretty big breakthrough in a lot of technology right now, and that's because 5G is almost here. And 5G has been advertised as being up to 100 times faster than 4G. And so people are like, well, what does that mean? Just everything's faster? And what it really means is when I've talked to people who are developing this technology and analyzing this technology, it's that we don't really know yet what it means. So when 3G, we weren't really sure what it means. But when 4G came out, people like Uber could develop an app that let you pick them up, or Lyft, or whichever one you like, that let you pick them up and you can watch the car come find you and get you. You couldn't do that before with 3G. A lot of videos you couldn't watch on 3G. So all these new huge industries started because of the advancement of technology. And with 5G, it's going to go even further. And that's going to really change the way, especially with autonomous driving is one that could really change, because you're going to need to be wired for these cars, not only because of the sensors can do what they do, but the cars are also going to need to talk to each other. So if you're over here in your lane, your car, and I'm over here in my lane, and your car wants to go over here to take a left, it tells my car I'm coming over. So my car slows down, etc.
What's interesting is like transportation, thinking about that, but then once it's introduced, you don't know, like what you're saying, you don't know who's going to come up with some completely new like infrastructure that could utilize that. I myself am a YouTuber and creating content and all that other stuff. And like I asked earlier, like the difference between the two mediums of like I feel like there's such a, it's not a machine, but it's definitely a great infrastructure to achieve the kind of news that needs to be pumped out at quantity. What do you see with like YouTubers or just content creators nowadays in how they utilize the space?
If you don't watch news and you're not a big news fan, you might be able to get some benefits from watching the news. And really I think storytelling is a big reason why, because a lot of what YouTube creators they're reporting. Now, a lot of times they're reporting on like,
it's true.
These are my new shoes, check them out. That might be their reporting, which isn't really traditional news. Mm-hmm. But how do you tell that story in a concise way that isn't an entertaining way? Because I think that's really what everybody's trying to do at the end of the day is entertain people. Mm-hmm. That's what all this stuff is really for. I mean, we don't do entertainment. We do reporting and news and more educational. But I think watching the news can help people learn how to do something more concisely, more impactful. I don't think you always have to be on camera to tell your story. I think more people, and I think you do this well, is utilize what we call VO, and it's video over your track. It helps you share some visuals to tell your story. And there's some great, at CBS News, I mean, 60 Minutes is a great show. CBS Sunday Morning is a great show. You learn something every time you watch those shows. And they do great storytelling. And they don't have whoosh and whoosh and, all these great effects, because we don't want the cameras and the editing to get in the way of this. We want the story to be the star, for lack of a better term. The story is what's important, the telling of the story. So, you watch a 60 Minutes thing and they might be on one shot for 15, 20 seconds with like a slow push, Mm-hmm. And it's not as exciting as what you see on a lot of like YouTube things.
The content's there.
But the content's there, and there's a great story there. And it's you just sit back, you chill, you watch it, and you learn something, And I think really as people can learn how to tell stories and use words, words can be your friend when you're trying to communicate. And like me, I'm not a great talker, but I'm a pretty good writer, and I'm pretty good at like sitting down and developing a story through words.
With words and everything. With online content now, would you say that being able to tell a story without words is more important than being able to tell a story with? And now, what I mean, though, is like you can still put words on the screen, but if somebody wasn't going to look at or wasn't going to listen to it and they're just scrolling through their phone, but they're going to sit there and watch it, what would you say that's a good asset to have?
Wow. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, because, I don't really think in those terms. You can't hear it. But, I know, and we have our own people that do stuff like they do a lot. We call it text on screen. Mm-hmm. And that's a weird situation because you need people to read the words, but also see the video. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole new skill of like making sure your shot's long enough to translate what you're showing them in the words. So it's hard. I mean, I've done a few of them, and it's difficult to do them properly. But once you kind of get it down, it's not so bad. But yeah, I think a key there is don't move too fast. You know, you want your shots to breathe a little bit so that people can actually see them for a second if you're trying to translate. Because if your edits are really quick and they're trying to read the words at the same time, they can't get everything to go in through the eyes and into the brain.
Yeah, for sure. Those kind of videos that do very well are the charity pieces that are like on Instagram, but they're only 60 seconds, and they showcase like, all right, this is the boy or girl that has some sort of thing, and they're trying to do it, and then they like maybe show the parent saying something, and then you go back to this happened, and then they like got some sort of surgery, and then now they're better. But being able to tell that in such a short period of time, and then you can relate to it by just seeing their struggles and how they were before and how they transformed to how they are now. I don't know if it's a different kind of storytelling, but it's like, I feel like that's where a lot of the media is going now, in order to capture people's attention on a little cell phone screen now. But it sounds like you kind of agree.
Yeah, it's so hard. You know, you just don't know. I mean, you know, we saw a lot of people using Facebook as a way to get their whatever they were doing out, and then that kind of changed. And now it's a lot of YouTube, but then you say, you know, Instagram. A lot of people are going to Instagram, and so
it's just like
you're not really sure. You know what? I don't know. I wish I did know, because if I did know,
you'd be like, I'd be in a different place right now.
Like, check out my Lamborghini.
But with that, I believe there is the all-encompassing being able to tell a story in general. And I think what you were talking about with like 60 seconds and all the other 60 minutes, with those shows, I think if you just do a normal cut, it's so timeless as opposed to having a sweet swish zoom flip flippity blap tweet the twat.
Yeah, not to get too deep into editing, but sometimes you just have to use a dissolve because you don't have the shots. But a lot of things, what we do is our photographers shoot things, and it's basically just a wide, medium, tight. So I was going to do a story about how Javi's making a sandwich. So I would get a wide shot of the kitchen, and he's laying out the bread. And then I would get a shot of his face, and I would get a shot of his hands, and then I would get a medium shot.
I'm seeing
and
this
then
in
I
my
would
head
get a
as
reverse. Yeah. So it's like wide, bing, 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 bing. You know, as the narrator or the reporter is saying, you know, Javier Mercedes has been making sandwiches since he was a young child.
The question that I ask everybody at the end of all the podcasts is, if somebody were to pursue where you're at today, and I love how you've transgressed from Idaho and even before then to like, and even the thing I love about this field is the technology that is married along with how you progress in video and online media, or just media in general. It's like you were talking about, you had to run from like the top of the box office all the way down. I never even would have thought about that, and because there's tablets. But in order for somebody to be a producer, writer, editor, CBS News right now, if they were in college, what would they need to do?
Well, you need to learn a craft. I mean, you can't really do it just hoping someone's going to hire you and train you. You need to try to learn how to do it. And today, people have much more of an advantage. If you can get Adobe Premiere or whatever editing program you like, you can sit down and, like you did, like I did back in the day, like a lot of people have, just play with it. And hopefully you learn that, like, someone who can draw, someone who can play the guitar by ear, maybe you can figure out how to edit. And then there's a million tutorials, including one by Javier Mercedes, that have been used by myself and other people at CBS, where you can learn how to do all kinds of, from titles to whatever, through these programs. And so it's a lot easier these days to learn how to do things right on your own computer. My other suggestion too is, if you want to be in the news business or you want to be a YouTube creator, just watch other people's stuff. And I don't want to say copy it, but can you do that? Can you kind of mimic it? And another way is, if you watch a TV story, type down what they say, write yourself a script. And when you see what it looks like, you get a better understanding of how these things go along. Narration, soundbite. And that was a big, when I did that the first time, when I typed down, I watched a news program and I wrote down what they said and I looked at it. And when I saw it in that form, because that's how we put our stories together. I go out and do interviews. I write down what the people say. I look at all my video and then I write to the video. That's another key for any YouTube creator. Write to your video. Don't write to what you don't have, write to what you do have. Because,
if you can't show it, then it didn't really happen. That whole thing.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think those three things: watch as much news as you can, see if you can do what they do, and then like new editing systems, and then writing. Just write all the time, because you really have to become friends with words, and learn how to use them in your favor. And those are really the keys.
Do you have any like quick tips on how to effectively approach a story and tell it in such a small amount of time that like keeps the audience engaged? Yeah,
it's one thing that young producers and reporters struggle with, is that you're interviewing somebody, and I'm interviewing Javier Mercedes, and he's telling me he went from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Atlanta, Georgia to here. I don't have time to explain all of that. So
unless you have a podcast.
Unless you have a podcast. So I say, Javier Mercedes graduated high school in Fort Wayne, and after college, he eventually landed in Austin, Texas. So now I've told your entire story in like 5 seconds. But it's a good way to set things up, because you just don't have the time. So you have to like just hit the biggest notes and tell your story as efficiently as you said, and concise is probably the best word. You have to be concise.
And I believe that's the biggest benefit of doing VO.
Yeah, that's a good benefit. Yeah, because sound bites are great, but people don't talk in short little nuggets. So you have to let the VO do the rest of the storytelling, as opposed to today where I've been rambling on like forever.
Is that hard for you?
To be honest, I thought, God, I think this is going to be a short podcast, because I think I'm just going to like.
No, we're at an hour 20.
I know, and as I've sat here, I'm like, we've been here forever.
Yeah,
and I listened to. I've been a PIP fan since the beginning. I've seen every single one or heard every single one, and sometimes I'm like, man, these people ramble on forever. Like nobody cares, man. And now I'm like, I'm that guy.
Well, there you go. With that, if you did enjoy this podcast, you can share it out on all the social things, Twitter, Snap. I don't even use Snapchat, but if you did snap the chats, you could do that too. On Instagram and Facebook and all the things. I'm at Javier Mercedes X. Again, I'm on Patreon. If you do get any value out of this podcast, it's www.patreon.com/Javier Mercedes. And until next time, live a life of abundance. And Chris, thank you so much for your time. An amazing story and just your whole journey. It's awesome to hear.
Yeah, and I interviewed, is it Jack Conte? Is that the guy? Yeah, I interviewed him back in the day.
Yeah, Patreon, hey!
Almost as much energy as you, but...
Oh, dude, so after doing a couple podcasts with other people that have like met him and doing all that stuff, that guy is off the walls with energy and like, talking about somebody that's passionate. He's definitely like, he's gun-ho about what he's doing.
Yeah, his passion progresses at a very high rate.
That is true. That is true. Well, thank you again, and see you guys.